I'll just leave it on there.
Yeah, you're just leave.
Esther Blattis.
Yeah.
So she is. Oh,
Okay. Thank you. Exactement.
On va vous demander 1, 2, 3. Tu demandes d'ouvrir le 8, le numéro 8. 1, 2, 3. Donc on leur demande de se... 1, 2. Le 8. Mesdames, Messieurs, nous allons vous demander de prendre place. Merci de prendre place. Please take your seats. Thank you. We'd love to start as soon as possible. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to 11 Symposium of Level Class Superior to your Yachting with Sense today, starting soon. Can I ask all the speakers of the meeting, the conference this morning and this afternoon of this crowdfunded to come on stage for a picture, please?
Hi. Do you want me on there as well? Oh. Sound test, sound test.
On va couper la Madonna pour
Might
quelques
be a good
secondes.
time
Merci.
to turn my microphone off.
Yes, please.
Shall I
On
go
va
behind?
couper la Madonna.
Can I
Merci.
call all the speakers on stage for the main for this picture, please?
So many speakers.
The speakers from the Antarctic conference this morning from 9 to 11 and the one starting at 2 to 4 regarding the crowdsourcing for super yachts. Can I call all the speakers to be on the stage for the picture? Thank you. Please take all the seat. Thank you so much for all this amazing panel we have today on stage at the 11th Symposium of the Label Class Super Yacht. We will discuss of Monaco, capital of yachting, and yachting with sense, and amazing conferences this morning and this afternoon. Thank you everyone being here. Thank you being assembled today to create the yachting with sense and the responsible yachting. Thank you.
Under your applause, sous vos applaudissements, on peut le faire. Voilà, c'est très bien. Parfait. Merci. Merci. Je vais vous inviter à rejoindre vos places.
After you.
So I ask the speakers to be in these places. They are reserved for you.
Hi.
Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for being here at the Yacht Club of Monaco. This year, the Principality of Monaco is hosting the 5th edition, as Christina said, of Monaco Ocean Week, organized by the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation in partnership with the Monaco Oceanographic Institute, the Monaco Scientific Center, and the Yacht Club of Monaco. As the tradition dictates, Yacht Club of Monaco, our host, is responsible for the yachting component and established as a platform of exchanges for owners, its members, and yachting professionals. The Yacht Club welcomes any initiatives that highlights innovation and environment solution to drive development of tomorrow yachting. It's my pleasure, and it's an honor, to welcome here on stage to address to you the General Secretary of the Yacht Club of Monaco, Monsieur Bernard Alessandri.
Merci. Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to receive you and very welcome in the club, because I think it's an important day. It's an important day during this week. This week is also many conversation, very discussion, very exciting. But we are building the future, and in particular, we are responsibility for the yachting, and I think we can work on this sense and to build a new yachting and yachting more sustainable, more effective, and also to think about how we can use the boat in the future. If you want to continue to use the yachting and the yacht, we have to change a lot of things in a few years now. Thank you to be here, and I'm sure you have a very good week, a very good date with us. Thank you. Mark.
Merci Bernard, merci beaucoup. This morning, Mr. David Seal will chair the 11th Label Class Super Yacht Environment Symposium on the theme Yachting with Sense. It's focused on exploration, in particular navigation in the Antarctic, and how to navigate in different way to protect the environment. It's also an honor to welcome here on stage Mr. David Seal, please.
Well, welcome to Monaco, the capital of advanced yachting, where we'll be talking today about yachting with sense. Of course, to talk about yachting with sense, we need to have a collection of sensible speakers to talk to us. In a curious twist, though, some of the speakers that we have today have done things that most people will consider far from sensible. They'd actually consider it to be quite crazy, some of the things that some of our speakers have done. Those speakers are amongst the most inspirational, educational, motivational people that we can hear from. As we listen to how they did these things which are apparently not particularly sensible, but they made sense of them. They did them for a reason, and they'll be telling us what that reason was. Our first speaker is one such individual. I'm not going to tell you too much about her just yet, because I'll be introducing her in just a few moments. First, though, much of this morning will be focused on exploring in extreme areas such as Antarctica. If one is thinking of going to Antarctica in their yacht, how can they do that with sense? How can you do it with sensitivity to the environment? How can you do it in a way that brings benefits beyond just enjoying the scenery of the area in which you enjoy being? When I was told that we'd be talking about Antarctica, I wanted to do some research. So I went to Antarctica on marinetraffic.com. And there I saw there are a number of ships and yachts, all kinds of vessels there. So I thought it was very wise and very insightful on the part of the organisers to find people who've actually been there, to find captains, to find yacht owners, to find individuals who can come here to Monaco and tell us about their experience. So we'll be hearing from speakers who have actually explored unmapped areas of the Antarctic. We'll be hearing from speakers who've actually witnessed climate change, and they can tell us exactly what it is that they've seen. We'll be having speakers who can tell all that. There'll be a lot of questions that people have for the speakers. So at the end, there will also be an opportunity to ask questions of the speakers, not just for people here in the room right now, but for anybody listening to the live stream too. You can actually type up any question that you have, send it off to us, and we'll do our best to make sure those questions are answered. To help us with that, we have more experts with us today to give us some extra support. We have Dr. Jérôme Chapelaz, who's from the National Centre of Research. He has an amazing knowledge of polar research, having actually organised some research expeditions. We have Anne Choquet-Sauvin, excuse me if I've got the pronunciation wrong. She's a marine legal expert who is extremely well informed regarding the importance for environmental protection of the Antarctic. And then we have Captain Sylvain Stiles, who's the Chief Safety Officer of Silver Sea Cruises. All of those people are here to share their knowledge, to share their experience, to answer our questions, whether it's done publicly in this forum or afterwards while we're networking. Everybody is keen to share their knowledge. Now, though, let me tell you about our first speaker. She's flown in all the way from San Francisco to speak with us, and honestly, we're very honoured to have her here today. Her love of the ocean led her to make it her life's work to study the ocean, spending countless hours underwater as she researched not just the ocean, but how to protect the ocean, and just as importantly, if not more so, how to protect the many, many lives that live in our oceans. The thing that particularly stood out to me about her is that she actually holds the record for the depth underwater in what's called a gym suit. I didn't know what a gym suit is. A gym suit is one of those suits that looks like an astronaut's suit, but is made to be underwater. She actually went to almost 400 meters underwater, untethered, setting the world record, which stands to this day. In 1998, National Geographic made her, to this day, their Explorer in Residence. In that same year, when Time magazine decided to award a Hero of the Planet, she was the first Hero of the Planet. But probably the title that I most like is the one that's found on her Instagram profile, calling her her deepness. So it's my honour to introduce her deepness to the platform, Dr. Sylvia Earle. Sylvia.
Thank you. Do I have a microphone? So I can be heard way in the back. It is such a privilege to be here in this place of great historic significance concerning the relationship of humankind to the ocean. 1909, when this place was first established. Imagine, it was 1909 when Admiral Perry and his companion reached the North Pole for the first time. Now we know what our predecessors of not so long ago could not know, the importance of the polar regions to shaping the nature of the planet that we so very much take for granted. It's only right about now, in the 21st century, that we are beginning to understand that everything we care about, let's start with breathing. Let's start with having a planet that works in our favor. Imagine trying to have the things that we care about, from great yachts to a place to live, to forests, to deserts, to all the things that we think of as our planet, anywhere else, not just in the solar system, but anywhere else in the universe. It's only about now that we're able to connect the dots, put things together. The beneficiaries of knowledge that's been gathered since, I guess, the beginning of our species. Every generation learning things, passing along, learning things, passing it along. And here we are with the gift of knowing what no one could know going back to, say, the middle of the 20th century. The beginning of what geologists are now referring to as the Anthropocene, a time when the impact of us, we humans, on this little blue speck in a universe that's otherwise really pretty unfriendly, that we are we're one species among, well, it depends on how you count. As far as we know, about 1.5 million other species share Earth with us, at least those for whom we have given names. But the actual number may be 10 times, or if you count the microbes, those little shifty creatures that keep morphing into new forms, including the most recent one that has given us a hard time, a little virus that likes us for lunch, that it may be, 100 million species, if you count these little guys as well as whales and elephants, redwood trees and the like. But no other species has commanded the impact on Earth as have we. We are a force of nature. We've changed the nature of nature through our actions. Imagine if we did not know. Imagine if we continued doing what we've done throughout all of our history, consuming the natural world to foster our prosperity. In fact, that's what all creatures do. When you think about it, birds borrow little twigs to make their nests. Birds eat their neighbors, insects, and sometimes other birds. It's a whole dynamic world of the changing of energy from one form to another. And as Carl Sagan astutely observed, it's not just the rocks and the water and the rest of life on Earth. We are all made of stardust. We all share common elements of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, you know, all the things that make up us and make up maybe all of the rest of the universe. But to be a 21st century human being, maybe being the luckiest time in all of history to be alive, to understand what our predecessors could not. 1800 marked just the beginning of being able to get far enough south to imagine that, yes, there is land down there, but it was not until 1820 that the first glimpse of Antarctica, the continent of Antarctica, was made. You know, Antarctica, this frozen mass at the bottom of the world, and at the top of the world, a frozen ocean surrounded by land. And our predecessors did not know that. I mean, what we now know is just exhilarating. Our place on this planet, our place in the universe, and the opportunity that our predecessors could not have, did not have, and could not have because they did not know what is now known about how Earth came to be what it is over literally billions of years, a planet that is suitable for the likes of us, and how in only a few decades we've managed to unravel many of the basic systems, the living systems that make our existence possible. So 1800, there were about 1 billion people on the planet. So when the first explorers began to come to Antarctica, with only 1 billion people sharing space on this little blue speck in the universe, what were they after? What humans have always been after: exploiting nature in order to, you know, build our prosperity. And those first explorers, they're looking for, of course, new territory to command, but also the first ones, you think about the name Palmer, Weddell, and others. They were sealers. They wanted to go out and, you know, take the skins off all of the little creatures that had never known predation on a scale that we as humans imposed on them. And it took place over a period of years. As our numbers grew, their populations diminished. We turned our attention to penguins. We turned our attention to whales, but it was always in the earlier days of our getting acquainted both with the northern reaches of polar areas and also in Antarctica. And you would think that looking at history, we would say that didn't work. We have the power to really reduce populations, even to exterminate species. But when we did not know that it mattered to us, did not know that the fabric of life is what keeps us alive, it was easy to squander the natural world, to clear-cut forests, to consider the atmosphere above as just an endless place that we could allow our, whatever it is, burning things, it would just go away. Or putting things into the ocean, things would just go away. But now we know. We are so fortunate to be armed with knowledge in the 21st century. And yet, what are we doing in Antarctica? Well, some, and I'm in the company of many, who go to savor the wilderness, to really appreciate how polar regions, the Arctic and the Antarctic, have a dominant role in shaping the climate that we take for granted. Some call it the air conditioning system of Earth because it's the polar areas that the cold water sinks and travels throughout the ocean, driving the difference between cold water and warm water, the difference in temperature, the difference in salinity, powered by the spin of the Earth, powered by the wind, but also powered by the differences in cold and heat we have a planet that works in our favor. But if we do something different, slow the circulation, which is, by the way, beginning to happen, if we alter the nature of nature, the living planet, which we are doing, what will be the outcome for us? And now that we know that it matters, why are we still doing what we did to the seals, to the whales, to the penguins and other birds, and now shifting our focus to krill and deep sea fish, the so-called toothfish, the Chilean sea bass, the Oreos, or whatever name you want to put, the orange roughy. Imagine if we marketed orange roughy by the name that scientists assign to these amazing deep sea creatures that can live longer than humans, don't even start to reproduce until they're maybe 25 or 30 years old, but can be consumed in an instant on your plate. Orange roughy, known as slime heads. Would you have slime head for dinner? Under a different name, you'll eat just about anything. And we are consuming just about everything alive on the planet. Until now, we're beginning to see, because of the evidence, to connect the dots, to see that climate and life, that the ocean and climate are totally connected. People now speak of life in the ocean as blue carbon, of those krill in Antarctica as vital to capturing and holding the carbon, plankton in the ocean, the forests in the sea, complementing the forests on the land. At the conference that began this Ocean Week here in Monaco, John Kerry, who's the US Special Envoy for Climate, at this critical point in history, he started out by saying, we have a climate crisis, and we cannot solve the climate crisis unless we solve the ocean crisis. And we cannot solve the ocean crisis unless we solve the climate crisis. They're all tied together. It's exciting that we now see this, we know this, and so we can do things to turn it around, to move from planetary degradation, which takes us to a very bad place, to planet recovery, which takes us to what we dream about, a future that we want, a future that really is with a planet where we can breathe, where fresh water magically falls out of the sky, the way it has done throughout our history. But increasingly, that water that falls out of the sky isn't as clear and pure as it was even when I was a child, let alone going back in time. So, what can you do? You, who have armed with power of knowing what is now known, with the capacity to go places and see things that your predecessors, mine, none have been able to, start out here perhaps and go down to Antarctica and then maybe swoop around into the tropics and go back. I mean, we can see, the children of today can see what no one could see before, that how closely connected to nature we are, that our existence, our survival, everything we care about has to change. Respecting and caring for nature is the new headline. And we have to also shift our focus not just to the skies above, which has given us so much new insight, seeing Earth from space, being able to monitor the nature of the ocean and the land and life throughout the world from high above. We now have to shift to consider basically what's under your boats, what's under the yacht, what's in the sea. Imagine if we did not know. I've been privileged to take little submarines, more than 30 different kinds of submarines, down into the depths of the ocean. And I wish I could scoop all of you up right now and be in a clear bubble and just start out right here in the Mediterranean. Why not? The surface is beautifully blue, and at midday, when the sun is high, as you descend, you see different shades of blue, and it gets darker and darker, and finally, almost purple. And then it's black, except it's not totally dark because there's life with bioluminescence, the flash, the sparkle, the glow of creatures that illuminate the darkness and keep going into the deepest parts of the ocean, not just here, but everywhere. The deepest place, 11 kilometers down, there's life all the way. That is the least explored part of our planet, especially in the polar regions. But we're beginning to accomplish that on our watch, your watch. Now we know. And this is, as never before, an opportunity to use this unprecedented knowledge, this unprecedented power, to do what we can to find our place within the natural systems that make our existence possible. So, thank you for coming to address these issues. I look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists about their perspectives and their concepts about what we can do, like the Seakeepers International Society that began right here in Monaco, like what you're doing now to see how yacht owners can take the opportunities they have to begin to gather information, to assemble greater knowledge, so that maybe in the next 100 years, 2109, to celebrate the 200th anniversary of this organization, this yacht club, we can look back at this time and say, thank you for understanding and taking this moment in time to make a difference. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sylvia. That was absolutely amazing. And although I was getting signals to ask to bring it to an end, it was impossible to do so because that was just such great information. For other speakers, I'm going to have a timer here, which will start counting down just to help you with the actual timing of the presentation. And actually, we're really looking forward now to listening to the owner and captain of a very special vessel, the MY Polar Front. It's a 55-meter vessel, and the captain and owner is Sophie Galvagnon. Hi, Sophie. You can take the microphone. So, Sophie, as I said, you're a yacht owner, you're a yacht captain as well, but you're particularly interested, and also you have the award of the Maritime. How did that happen? How did you get started?
Thanks. Thanks, everyone, for the invitation. I see such a big event like a hope for a transition, like Sylvia said, for a better future and changes for sustainable business in the polar shipping industry. I think I'm a polar passion woman from the ground. It was love at first sight when I met the ice first time in Antarctica 2008 with Captain Garcia here on board. And after that, I've dedicated my career to year-round polar handling. First, I worked on Swedish commercial and research icebreakers, and after that, at the age of 27, I became the first French female polar expedition captain. So I've learned from the Scandinavian school. It was a lot of fun, adventure, discipline, and exploration, and I really developed a strong passion for ice navigation, which is still my driving force today. 2017, a need of some other kind of exploration came up to go out from the ship's sphere, and in order to have a more powerful acting on the polar shipping business. So I became ship owner, and I grew a polar expedition company with the former Norwegian research vessel that we converted into polar expedition yacht, and she's now still sailing in the Arctic since then. Today, I've developed a consulting company called My Polar Ship, and I'm working now on behalf of other projects for other people, helping them to create their shipping company. And my specialty is to try now to develop sustainable models. What are sustainable models today in the polar shipping industry? It's first of all about ships, having new type of ships, innovation, techniques. We have solutions, but it's also, and we often forget it, about changing habits, because we have powerful impact on our way of acting, and it's a lot about changing the way we do it. So I'm, for instance, working currently for the French polar explorer Jean-Louis Etienne on his zero-emission carbon project Polar Pod and the 42 polar expedition sailing vessel Perseverance. That's one project, and I'm also working on the conception of ship and other projects.
You're also well known for exploring unmapped areas. What's all that about? What are these unmapped areas?
Exactly, it's another challenge. I like the challenges both on board ships and ashore. And I learned from a Swedish captain that was pioneer with the Lindblad Explorer in the polar shipping industry. He learned me how to read from the landscape and how to explore those blank areas on the charts, because there are a lot of unknown question marks there. And it's good for exploration and adventure, but it's also some kind of resource for knowledge and research. And unfortunately, today, with temperature rise, there will be more and more such areas to discover. So you have different ways to do it. The old way with your old hand echo load sonar, radars, and today there are also modern means like submarines or drones covering and giving more precise data.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Sophie.
Thank you.
Now, at the beginning, I mentioned that we'll also be speaking from people who've actually witnessed climate change. And so now I'd like to invite Captain Raiko Zupan from the motor vessel Marco Polo.
Yes, that's a Marco Polo picture, but long time ago, as you can see. So I started actually in Antarctica, 1990s, on another ship called Ocean Princess. And then once when you come on Antarctica, when you step on that continent, when you see this nature, when the nature actually is holding the last and the most beautiful concert of all, then you really start this eternal love, forever love, never-ending love with the continent. And I'm still in love with it. I spent, let's say, 12 years in Antarctica, and I still miss it a little bit. I miss these days and nights, no nights, but only days, because there's no nights when we are down there. So definitely a beautiful area, and yes, climate change. We were coming there every year in different time, sometimes in December, sometimes in November, but there was always different weather, different. But I didn't think about climate change that time. I saw sometimes chicks of penguin were already come out of the egg in December, but next year they were late in January, so I didn't really connect it. I'm not a scientist. I was just a poor, simple captain, you know. But then later on, sailing there with all the scientists, with the people like Sylvia Earle and all of, you learn a lot. You get interested in what is actually happening in the nature. But that time was 30 years ago, so there was not really extreme like we have today. So, what you see and what I saw in Antarctica, very simple mathematical difference is we go to places where the people are, and when the people are never been and they will never come with the ships. We go to the areas. We also circumnavigate the Antarctica, and then you see where there is a base, there is always garbage. If there is no base, no people, there is no garbage. It's a clean, pristine area where every penguin is a movie star. And you feel this, what Sylvie said, you have this continent made by the breath of the sea and the dust from the stars. So you see the most beautiful area in the world, actually, for me. And I was still very passionate. So sailing down there, I had the pleasure and honor to sail with the people like Lars-Erik Lindblad. He was the first one on the ship with us. He taught us where to go, how to do it. He gave us navigational charts, which Sophie is doing now. I sailed with Edmund Hillary, Vivian Fuchs, which were the first people who crossed the Antarctica, which was a challenge. And they never talk before they come on Marco Polo, and they talk to us. Because there was agreement that Vivian Fuchs, who was in charge of expedition, he will be the one to first to cross. But Hillary didn't wait for him, so he crossed. They never speak until one night on the ship when they start talking. So this was like historical moment for that part of the world, you know. And with all this love and passion which I have for Antarctica, sailing at seas more than 40 to 45 years actually now, I decided to stop sailing and go to some other things which are connected with the sailing. This time from the comfort of simulator and looking at the computers and let's say, looking at this climate change from completely outside of the ship. And then you have time then to really to see what is happening. So this year, just in February, I was involved with a rescue salvage operation of a small cruise yacht-like ship in Antarctica, which has a problem with engine. They were able to have the guests on board and do the landings to all the spots. Oh, I have 2 minutes, 48 seconds. So I was involved in this rescue operation where one ship was broken, and then we need to find another ship to come to Antarctica to salvage the passengers, bring them back to Ushuaia, and then a tugboat which will bring the ship back to Buenos Aires or Punta Arenas or wherever. So it was kind of interesting, and they show you that to save a ship, you need another ship, at least down there.
Can I ask you,
yes.
have you seen an impact from passenger ships and yachts on the environment there?
Yes, I can tell you, before when we started, there was one ship and a couple of these Russian tugboats. Now you cannot say even Russian, they were tugboats, who were who were sailing down there to Antarctica, really expedition. But now there is more than 40 ships in Ushuaia, and all these 40 ships are coming to Antarctica. And it's enormous traffic. It's like Miami down there now, right now. And you have many new ships, many new technologies on board. And all these technologies on board, like helicopters, like submarines, like drones, everything else. Can you imagine a poor dolphin or poor penguin to wake up one day, saw the 3 helicopters flying around, 2 submarines just coming out of the water? How stressful is this for them? So I don't speak dolphin language or whale language, but I would like to talk to these creatures to tell us how is the impact to us, to them, from us to them. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you. We now have the captain of motor yacht Naya, which is a 73-metre super yacht, who has actually been to the Antarctic. I understand he's joining us by Zoom, so I'm waiting for a prompt from somebody technical and hoping that his face appears on screen. Captain Alex, pleasure to meet you. Can you hear us okay? I think you're muted. Do you want to try again, see if we can hear you? Captain Alex, can you hear us? Because we can't hear you. I think it may be at our end. Do you want to try again? I think we've got a technical problem, so unless you can sign language, what I'll do is maybe our technical people can try to resolve that. We'll move on to the next speaker, and then we'll come back to you as soon as the problem's resolved, if that's okay. Thanks for your patience with that. So, we'll come back to Captain Alex. I don't think he is muted. I think it's probably something that we need to sort out here. And we'll move on to Captain Vincent Taillard, who's an ice pilot from the Scenic Eclipse, which is a 168-metre vessel. Captain Vincent. Now, you're involved in the cruising industry. How does the cruising industry work in polar regions?
So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. So, first of all, going down with Antarctica, as my colleagues say, is a challenge, but it's also a privilege to be able to visit those places and everything. But you have some rules. As Captain Racco said, nowadays we have around 50 cruise ships coming down of various sizes. You have some rules depending the number of guests you're going to disembark ashore. You have a certain amount of guests allowed ashore at the same time, depending the place you go in Antarctica, if it's the peninsula or the Ross Sea. So you have to adapt yourself. The Yacht also is controlling the way that things are moving, of course, to protect the environment, to protect the wildlife, to protect everything. So we have to adapt this on the way to operate the ships. Unfortunately, yes, sometimes it's busy traffic, kind of Miami, yeah, for sure, I would agree. But you have to adapt to the timings. Some landings are actually very famous. You have actually 15 to 16 major landings where all the ships, most of the ship goes, because the idea for the guests is to step ashore for most of them, or to go cruising actually with the ship. After you have some other landings which are a bit more complex, but most of them, 70% of the guests landing on Antarctica goes on 15 sites. So it's actually interesting, but it's challenging because the weather, of course, on those pictures is amazing, but it's not always like that. Of course, to go down to Antarctica, depending if you start from Ushuaia or from New Zealand, you could have a bit of washing machine to go down. Not always the same. But yes, it's challenging, but it's part of to be able to see those amazing places and those amazing sceneries. Yes, it's complex, but we have to follow the rules in any case.
You're the second person that said it's like Miami. So is it literally these landing sites? There are boats continually going to the landing sites and having to time the arrival?
On most of the landings, you have 3 slots per day, if I'm correct. So you have to choose your slots every day. It's adapted to every vessel, actually. You have a different of, let's say, 4 or 5 hours. So you have to arrive on site, do your operation, landing the guest, and leave as quick as you can to allow the next ship to come with his guest, no matter his size. So
what about the vessel itself? What sort of equipment do you need on board to make it safe, but at the same time not stifle the enjoyment for the guests?
Most of the guests want to land on the 7 continents. So you have to be able to send them shoreside safely, quickly, and that everybody goes. If you have a ship with 80 guests, 60 guests, it's quite easy. If you reach more than 200, it becomes kind of challenge because you have to rotate people. So you have to have simple things, simple tools. I saw some picture before of my colleague of some easy inflatable boats. That's actually the best things from my perspective to do that. Of course, you have new toys, submarines, helicopters, but this is another story. The main thing is to send them shortly, safely, shoreside, and to get them to see all these things, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed that. Moving on, we have Captain Estelle Blett, who's the expedition officer of a 131-metre vessel called L'Austral. And I believe, Estelle, you'll be using this is the clicker for your slideshow, so I'll leave it there for you. So, Estelle, if I can just start by asking you the question about safe navigation. I know that for you the importance of safety in the Antarctic is absolutely paramount. What are the details on sort of chart work in that area?
Bien, Thank you very much for inviting me here first. In the maritime industry, the leading cause of ship accident is roughly 80% human error. So mismanagement of risk, including severe weather and ice condition, can cause a collision, grounding, and structural damage, and all of which can harm the environment significantly. So that's why I think that safe navigation is the first pillar of environmental protection. The Antarctica's main difficulty is to figuring out one's position accurately. One complication is the poorly charted seafloor. Most of the polar regions are poorly charted, so surveys have been conducted for 100 years but are still in progress. And there are a lot of difference between the soundings which were made with lead lines and soundings with the sonar system, which are more recent and more accurate. And because it's not too much charted, we need to use this poor sounding, poor accurate sounding. So this is, for example, in some areas we can read the soundings at depth, but there is like 500 meters possible error and some error in the depth itself. OLEX is a nice tool. It's an automatic depth recorder, and it can be shared with a different ship. Another specificity we need to be aware of is inconsistent chart datum. So sometimes we will read on the chart that GPS position cannot be transferred directly to the chart. There is an offset of X nautical miles northwards and X nautical miles westward.
But is that because the Antarctic is kind of partly melting, it's ice, things move, or is that just an inaccuracy in the chart?
It's just because the surveys have not been made all over, and it's not surveyed. There is no sounding at all. But melting doesn't help, that's for sure. Yeah. It discovers some area because the ice shelf is moving or fracturing, and it increases the difficulty. So how to determine the ship's true position? We use most of the time 3-point fixes using radar range when sailing near the coast, but the difficulty over there is everything is white, and you can have iceberg grounding on or stranding on the shallow waters. So you think you plot the tip of an island, and actually you plot the iceberg, and you can take your binoculars to check if what you see, and everything is white. So it's very difficult to differentiate iceberg from land, even at short distance. Building familiarity with the area is a huge advantage. We use our homemade charts all the time, which we'd add to on every cruise. Once going into poorly charted water, the officer logs the depth, and it's intensive work. Oh, sorry.
That's not the Antarctic, it's too black.
So, but it's really important. It improves the safety considerably. Finally, one must keep in mind that Antarctica is a particularly challenging place because it's remote. There is no ashore infrastructure, and it's when it comes to emergency response capability, it can be really difficult. It's a harsh environment, and sailing in Antarctica requires special skills to avoid accidents. Since no accidents means no catastrophic pollution, this is a key factor in the protection of the environment.
The motor vessel Oslo, I didn't have time to completely research it. Is it what kind of a ship is it? Is it a research ship or a passenger ship?
Passenger ship,
Okay.
yes.
So amongst other things, you're also obviously concerned about the safety of the passengers as well as the
Yes,
ship
that's
itself.
for sure. It's really important. Correct.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have the captain of an 88.5 metre motor vessel called Le Commandant, and we welcome Commandant Etienne Garcia.
Yes, good morning to everybody. I'm very happy to be here. Actually, it was by any chance because I have on my ship a cadet who was sailing in the super yacht, and he said, "Oh, Captain, I think it will be interesting to talk about our experience." So I say, "Yes, why not?" I'm very happy to be here in the yacht club. It's very meaningful for me. So I am, let's say, captain on the polar region since about 17 years, more or less. And when you are caught by the virus of the polar region, you cannot get rid of it anymore. And which is very important, and you say sailing with sense is definitely my goal. It's something that we learn all the time, every day, since you are reaching this region. In fact, we just built with my company an exceptional vessel, Le Commandant Charcot, which is in fact the first ice-breaking cruise ship, Polar Class 2, which allow us to go in the region where nobody could go before. But I think it's very important. It doesn't mean that we have to go everywhere. And in fact, I learned that we have to build limits, although that we have the capability to go everywhere. Okay, it's a PC2 vessel, so it gives me, it's very comfortable regarding the safety, because I know that I can sail in a place, especially in the covering ice, where no other ships can go. So what we learn in North Pole and also in Antarctica, that you know, we have different type of ice. You have drifting ice and you have fast ice. Fast ice is the ice that is, you know, attached, fastened to the land. And, you know, like this is the fast ice. We have the capability, because we can break 3 meters of ice easily. We have the capability to go through, but we realize that because we are sailing early in the season, that a lot of wildlife breeding in this area. So, although that I have the capability to cross and to break the ice, we have decided to just stop in the ice and give the experience to our guests, so we land them and they can walk, and we made a softened approach to the wildlife. This is also fast ice. So I have the possibility to go through, but I will not go. It's exactly what we have learned, how to raise limits, although that we have the capability to go. We cannot sail with arrogance. We have to sail with humility, is exactly what I've learned every day since I'm going in Antarctica. The company also decided to not sail with a helicopter, I mean, just for sightseeing. We finally kept one helicopter just for the safety of the navigation, and also to confirm the analysis of the ice on the satellite picture. But the ice is moving. So we then send an ice patrol, and because for me the idea, even if it's drifting ice, I will try to cope with the ice gently and to go in the leads, open water that the current will do, and you know, in order, instead to go directly and to cross a big ice flow, then we learn and we try to cope with Mother Nature. And I think this is the subtlety of the navigation that we learn. So we use the leads that is done by Mother Nature, let's say, and this is the way how we learn how to cruise. It's a cruise ship with an ice-breaking hull, but we are not an icebreaker. We are not opening channel for cargo ship. We are there to, let's say, to bring guests, to be the witness, let's say. So we have to do it gently and to cope really and to match with the Mother Nature.
What was the reasoning behind not wanting to use the helicopter for guests? What led to that decision?
Because for environmentally issue, in fact, so the department, our let's say our owner have decided to not use that. We are in fact, although that we have a very capable vessel, we would like, in fact, to offer activity which is more, let's say, ground activity. Like, for example, we like to disembark the passenger on the ice with a mountain guide and to do a walk, a simple activity, while to look for toys all the time and to come back to the originality, the original aspect, let's say, of just discovering a new place. So let's go. Let's just walk on the ice, observe the wildlife with a safe distance, and not be too harmful, especially using helicopter for sightseeing.
And the feedback from the customers, they were prepared
No,
to accept
in
that?
fact, at the beginning, because we explained very well, we explained to them that it was a choice. This is just for ice patrol, just to show. It was the choice, and finally they are not frustrating and they understand very well this decision.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
It's been
you.
fascinating. I'm sure you've all heard of Pelorus expeditions. I've heard a lot about it. Never met anybody yet from Pelorus, but I will be meeting, or we'll all be meeting somebody very soon, because I'm going to be inviting to the platform the co-founder and CEO of Pelorus Expedition, Geordie McKay-Lewis.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here. Thank you to the Monaco Yacht Club for having me. I think you're about to see a video which does involve helicopters, and I'll explain what we were doing in Antarctica this season and why we were using them. So we, at the beginning of the season, had a very interesting, quite expedition down to the western side of the peninsula. We took 2 yachts, Motor Yacht Legend, which most of you will know, and a helicopter support vessel also. The purpose of our expedition was threefold: to take its clients on a fairly pioneering skiing expedition, to try and observe as much wildlife as possible, but also to conduct a scientific research mission as well. We had 2 scientists to begin with. Unfortunately, one was unable to make it due to COVID. But the aim of the science and the aim of taking these vessels to Antarctica in the first place was to study penguins that had not been observed and studied in certain areas for up to 2 years because of COVID, but also to take phytoplankton and microplastic samples as well. We took Dr. Mercedes Santos from the Argentinian Antarctic Survey with us, and Dr. Mercedes Santos has been studying penguins, phytoplankton, and other areas of Antarctica for the last 30 years. So she's a real authority on the peninsula. And we essentially used helicopters to go to ski, but also to allow scientists to go deeper field. And what we mean by that is IATA regulations require 2 helicopters to go beyond line of sight of the vessels. So we needed 2 helicopters to explore much further and deeper into the peninsula than had been done before, and allow scientists to observe what was happening and what was changing deeper in the peninsula, but also allow us to essentially cover a lot more ground than we could in a 9-day charter. We covered with the helicopters a lot more area, and we were able to observe what had changed in the 2 years that scientists haven't been able to reach some of these places. So the outcome, and what is an ongoing research study, is that there's a decline of about 70% for 2 of the 3 main species of penguin on the peninsula. So Adelie and chinstrap penguins are declining rapidly. And this is mainly due to fisheries, the fishery issue and the removal of the food source, essentially, which supplies all of Antarctica, which is krill. So one of the main efforts of this was to take high-profile clients to observe what we hope to create, which is a marine protected area across the western side of the Antarctic Peninsula. And the more high-profile clients we can take to this area to lobby for this marine protected area, the better. If we achieve it, and it's being led by the Chilean and Argentinian Antarctic surveys, if we achieve it, it'll be an area of 670,000 square kilometers that will be protected against fishing. If that happens, then penguin populations will start to rise again. Not just penguin populations, everything else that exists off krill, which is essentially all wildlife in Antarctica. So it's a really important study, it's a really important cause, and hopefully we can encourage more high-profile clients to lobby that cause if possible. Any questions?
Actually, I was given a question to ask to you.
Great.
And it really it made me wonder, because the question was, what conservation benefits did you achieve during your yacht expedition? Is it really possible in an expedition to actually come back and feel that you've done something, you've contributed something to the environment, that you've actually come back with concrete benefits?
Yeah, I think it is. I think if you've got hard evidence on an ongoing research study, which with the data that goes back to both the Argentinian and Chilean Antarctic surveys, but also some of the data was going back to Oxford University and other areas, ongoing science projects, then I think that's tangible. I think also what we try and do at Pelorus is encourage 10% of all yacht activity, whether that's a charter or a privately owned vessel, to be dedicated towards research and conservation in the areas that we operate in. So if we can encourage the entire yacht industry to do the same, and even the cruise industry, then 10% of all of that activity going back into the environments that we're operating in can only be a very good thing, and it's very tangible. It's a very tangible amount of time and resources that dedicate to that.
And do you find that the guests also want to get involved in the data collection, or are they really just there to have fun and to see the sights?
Well, I mean, this looks like a lot of fun as well, but this wouldn't be nearly as experiential if you weren't operating with scientists, working with them, going out on the tenders to count the penguins, to see which penguin rookeries and colonies had increased in numbers or decreased in numbers, counting how many whales were in certain areas. All of that is great citizen science, as well as the data goes back into longer research programs. So I think you've got to encourage people to go there with fun and excitement and experience, but then once you're there, you can use all these assets to allow scientists to have a platform to do their work from. I think that's the really important thing, that you go there just for fun. It's not purposeful, and we don't really want to be encouraging non-purposeful travel anymore.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. That was very, very interesting. Next, we have a biologist and the founder of Grun's Espace, Christian Kempf.
Thank you very much, and good morning. I'm going to give you some general data about the whole tourism and nature conservancy in Antarctic. But first of all, I would tell you that it's with a certain emotion I'm here, because 120 years ago, Prince Albert I came back from Svalbard in the Arctic, gathering a lot of scientific data, but also having the spirit, having in mind that nature conservancy is important. And he was speaking at this time, at the very beginning of national park, of the concept of national parks, that Svalbard should be a national park. Some 50 years ago, when I made my first expedition to the Arctic, Prince Rainier, he sponsored our expedition and told me, Christian, remember, nature conservancy. And now we are at this Monaco week, again, speaking about nature conservancy. What a difference, because so long I was taken as a, let's say, stupid green monkey on large cruise ships. So you understand it's really a pleasure. Well, concerning Antarctic, we are going to speak about, it's really different from the Arctic. Arctic is a huge ocean, and North Pole is 4,200 meters deep, and South Pole in Antarctic is on a continent 2,835 meters high. The Arctic is under the sovereignty or owned by 5 countries, Norway, Greenland, Canada, United States, and Russia, and Antarctic is under the authority of the Antarctic Treaty. Antarctic is a huge continent, some more than 14 million square kilometers, completely icy, 98 and 99%. That means that you have also rugged peaks and mountains. You have a huge cordillera, a huge chain of mountains separating east and west, on going north to the southern tip of South America, on giving this long peninsula, more than 1,000 kilometer peninsula, where most of the tourism, most of the research is gathering, because it's quite easy to reach, only 800 kilometers from southern Argentina, and to come to this place. It's also the most conspicuous and the most historical place. Most of the tourists are going to Antarctic Peninsula. On this icy place, you easily can imagine there is absolutely no local population. The local population is made of scientists, and on approximately 100 places, in 52 polar stations, they are roughly in winter 1,500 to 2,000 scientists. And besides, the only activity, human activity, is tourism. And tourism began some, I would say, 50, 60 years ago, yes, with Salen Lindblad on the Lindblad Explorer. And now you have 3 types of tourism. First, sightseeing tourism with long flights coming from Australia, New Zealand, on B37 or B47, but they have no local impact. Then you have, of course, some adventure tourism. You have some mountain climbers, you have some skiers, mountain climbers going to the base camp of Mount Vinson, and also some adventure tourism just for skiing to South Pole. So, but the ticket is quite expensive, some $50,000 or euros. So on a cup of coffee or a box of Coke costs some 50 euros on these places. But then the most important tourism definitely is cruising. Just because Antarctic is surrounded by water, and that cruising is in fact very efficient, and certainly one of the non-polluting way or less polluting way to discover a place. You have 3 types of vessels, or let's say 4 types. First, all vessels with heavy oil are banned from Antarctic since a few years. And then you have other vessels up to, well, let's say from 13 to 500 people, which are allowed to operate landings, but landings are made not more than 100 passengers at once, with one guide for 20 passengers, and also on certain places. Only 5% of the places are really open, and usually 1 hour, no more. All these regulations are given by IATO, International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators. IATO is not here to promote the tourism, but to make tourism as a sustainable activity towards other activities like research or towards environment, of course. Then organizing somewhat in Antarctic brings always, I would say, 3 problems. First problem, for sure, is an, let's say, administrative or legal problem. You must be approved by your government, by your national authorities. Second problem, of course, is just due to Antarctic. It's far away. It's a remote place. You need roughly 1 month to go down, or another month to come up from Europe. It costs a lot of money for a few weeks. And finally, you always have to remember, we are in high seas. The Drake Passage is one of the worst places all over the world concerning seas. And you also are in high mountain environment with avalanches. And finally, you have a lot of fragile places, like bird colonies, like historical places, and so. In this frame, what is the future of such human occupancy of tourism in Antarctic? I see the future booming for, let's say, some more years. 1999, 3,000 persons. 15 years later, 2014, 30,000. Now, between 60 and 70,000, most starting from Ushuaia, or if fly on cruise, from Punta Arenas. For sure, it will develop. Why? Because the expedition cruise segment is one segment, one developing segment all over the world concerning tourism. If tourism has 1 or 2% increase each year, cruises is between 3 and 5, you know, an expedition cruise is supposed to be more than 10%. So for sure, it will develop. Also, Antarctic is still a new destination. And all new destinations, that's a general effect, has a booming period of 40 to 50 years. And we are still in this booming. And finally, Antarctic is so beautiful. So that's why definitely we'll have more than 100,000 people coming down on this huge continent, and that has to be sustainable, and that has to be well managed. That is why IATO is here. IATO has some 300 members, and IATO is in charge with making this development possible, bringing regulations and bringing always the best way to make it possible. Concerning cruising also, nevertheless, you have limits. And these limits will probably, and that will be my conclusion, will probably be flattened, will probably make this boom to stop in a few years. Why? Because first of all, you must be interested to go there. When you have your kids in the middle of the winter asking you to go to a skiing resort, or your husband or your wife asking for sunny Monaco or Croatia, why going to freeze to Antarctica? Everybody is just not interested to go to Antarctica. Also, there are some filters. I would say there are some people who just don't like long flights, long sea crossings, and finally, money problem. A ticket to Antarctica costs $10,000 or euros minimum from France, and that is a lot of money. Everybody cannot afford that. And that is why we, as Antarctic lovers, we as researchers or tourist managers, we as just members of yacht clubs have to speak and to deal our to share our experience with everybody. Because Antarctic becomes more and more like Arctic. In fact, our garden, it's far away for sure, but it's part of our planet. And that is why it's so important for us to offer to everybody, not only to the privileged people we are, because we have the possibilities to go there, logistically and financially, but to share it and to show how beautiful our planet is. And that should be really the main spirit of all expedition going to these polar areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't go just yet, though, because I have a couple of questions for you. A few of the things that you said really raised questions for me. The first was that you mentioned the Antarctic Treaty. I'm not familiar with that treaty. I don't know how many people here are, but in the context of people who want to travel to the Antarctic, what do they need to know about the Antarctic Treaty?
Well, frankly speaking, if you are a simple tourist, you will be informed, but you don't need to have any information about that. But if you organize something, then first, you need, let's say you are French, you need the approval of the French administration of Antarctic and subantarctic islands to be an expedition organizer. Then you have to go to IATO. On IATO, automatically, IATO is part, let's say it's, to make it simple, it's the Ministry of Tourism of the Antarctic Treaty. And what is the Antarctic Treaty? Okay. It was signed in 1950, 1952.
All of the world's countries as part of that treaty?
Only 53 countries, well, the most powerful and most important countries have signed. And it's a protocol, and in this protocol, well, it said what is extremely important, and what is an image for Antarctic, is the Antarctic is a land of peace and research, and it's a demilitarized area. But in the frame of this Antarctic Treaty, then you have 3 branches, and one branch concerning tourism is managed by IATO. And then step number 2, you have to go to IATO to apply, to be member, etc., etc. And at the very end, you go with your vessel, you have an observer on board, if you come for the very first time, and then even when it's running, you have a lot of guidelines, because it's our role as IATO. And in the north, you have the ICO, Association of Expedition Cruise Operator. It's the same, let's say. IATO was founded in 1991. ICO is more new. But you have guidelines concerning animals, concerning sites, concerning general rules of boats. So there is definitely a frame, and we have to work on this frame. Because at the beginning, let's say, when I went for the very first time, to Svalbard in the north, wow, fantastic. I was doing everything, no problem. I was a chief in the middle of my ice. Now it's different. But just because we are more numerous, we are more often coming to these places, which, by the way, also become more and more fragile, especially with the global heating.
One other quick question as well, before you go. You mentioned if you're French, you go to the French authorities. Is it your nationality, or is it the flag state of the yacht that determines the permission that you have to ask for?
For me, as a tour operator, it's the operator, but I cannot answer if it is the flag of the vessel.
I think we'll get that answer a little bit later today then. Great, thank you very much indeed, Christian, everybody. Very much appreciated. So we're going to try once again to get Captain Alex Whitty on the line. Christina, do you know if we made progress with that? Here he is. Alex, let's try again. Do you want to say a few words, see if we can hear you?
Can you hear me?
We can. Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, you're a captain that's actually been to the Antarctic. What was that like? First of all, tell us a little bit about the yacht, the vessel, and your experience in the Antarctic.
Okay, first of all, good morning, everybody. Real honor and a privilege to speak to you today, especially alongside such an esteemed panel. So thanks very much. It would also seem that going to Antarctica wasn't the most technically difficult challenge that I faced in my career. It was speaking on time at the 11th Environmental Symposium at the Monaco Yacht Club via a virtual link, so my apologies for that, of course. So yeah, my name is Alex. I've been the captain of a 75-meter charter yacht for 4 years now, and I had the privilege to take the boat to Antarctica. Going to Antarctica was an absolute bucket list for me. It was a real goal of mine in my career. It was a dream almost as distant as the location, and I was absolutely delighted to do a season in Antarctica, and I very much hope to go back there as soon as possible. In fact, the Antarctica dream for me started in Monaco. That was where the contracts were signed. That was where the planning and the preparations started. And I'm going to get into that and just talk very briefly about my experiences. In fact, my experiences doing one season Antarctica would be limited compared to the rest of the panel because there is just so much to it. The preparations start with several meetings with your expeditions team to get ready, bearing in mind we were a yacht that had never operated in that location before, so we had to basically start from the ground up, and we took a lot of shoreside support in order to do that. But I would say when it became real to me was when we arrived in Punta Arenas in Chile, just before entering the Drake's Passage, and the expedition leader came on board, and they have a meeting with all the crew. And at this point, it really feels real that you are going to such a special place. The point of this meeting is not only to tell the crew what a life-changing experience they're about to go through, and it is absolutely a life-changing experience going to Antarctica and being in that environment, but also the main goal is to talk about responsible observation. And it's not only a regulatory obligation, but it is also a moral obligation to ensure that we have the minimal environmental impact on such a sensitive and special continent. So you have this talk, you make it through the Drake's Passage on a small boat like Naya, just about, but we got there. As soon as you hit 60 degrees latitude, the ice watches is starting. That also sets the tone on the bridge for how to conduct yourself when entering such a sensitive area with regards to ice navigation. And again, it's feeling more and more real as you get close. We started our base point at the South Shetland Isles, where we would be waiting for guests. In fact, unfortunately for our season, due to COVID reasons, the guests were unable to board the boat. However, for recreational and also to get an experience of the place for the second charter, we did manage to go to some of the places in order to make sure that the boat was fully prepared for when the guests came on, and also to get the people trained up. One of the most amazing things about operating in Antarctica, I would say, is the camaraderie between vessels in the area. It's something that you don't get anywhere else. The boats work very closely together, they share tenders, they help pick each other's stores, there's constant communications, they're very respectful of the areas they go. For example, you'll only have one boat in one site and that is booked out, and there's constant communications. Even if you see a particular active area of wildlife, then that will be reported to other boats in the area, so everyone can take advantage of the wonderful things that you're going to see in Antarctica. Of course, as I said before, because it is such a important, sensitive sea area for the environment, then there's also the environmental factors that come into play on a day-to-day basis. I would encourage all yachts and any other vessels operating in the area to offset their fuel by offsetting the carbon through companies which can put putting back into the, have some water. So you can offset your fuel with certain companies by paying into them that put back into non-fossil fuel type. Okay. Also, with garbage, you cannot land any garbage ashore, obviously. And so if you can have certain ways of getting your garbage completely sealed up, vacuum packed and stored, and then that will be offloaded once you get back to your main port. Like I said, it was an absolute fantastic experience operating in Antarctica, something that I'd absolutely want to do again. And I welcome any questions.
Excellent. I'm so pleased we managed to connect to you, because that's fantastic to hear first-hand experience. I'm also a little bit off at a tangent, but you said that the first guests were unable to get on board due to COVID. That must have been devastating for the guests because of the amount of preparation involved in a trip like that.
Yeah, I didn't quite hear there, David. I think you were asking about how was it for the guests that were unable to make it?
Yeah, I was just saying that must have been quite devastating for them, given the preparation involved and then COVID causing it to not happen.
Oh yeah, I mean that was a real blow. I mean it was tough for them. They were actually in Punta Arenas, and unfortunately there was a COVID outbreak amongst the guests, and they were in isolation. So they were so close. But you know the places where you're operating that are so far away and so remote that it's always going to be a challenge getting there. And this is just one of those challenges. If it was easy, then it wouldn't be such a special place.
Excellent. Well, we're throwing open now to questions from people, so please stay on the line for any questions that are specifically for yourself. I think, first of all, I'll ask if anybody here in the audience has any questions for any one of our speakers or experts who are here as well. Or if any questions have arrived online from the live stream. If not, I have a question. Oh, we have a question here, gentleman here.
Hello, Florestan Fillon from the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. I think there's a lot of good intentions around the speakers and I'm sure around the room. I'm sure everybody understands that any anthropic activity, any human activity in polar regions in Antarctica is always a net negative on the environment. I must let the captain know that offsetting is a rather inefficient way of helping the environment in many, many ways, and it's an inefficient market, the carbon market, in so many ways in terms of environmental impact. So I'm wondering, what are some of the steps that we can take in order to limit activities rather than just thinking of how to do it better, but still continue to do it as much, if not more. So maybe that could go to the gentleman that talked about Ayato,
Christian Kempf, please.
Or anybody else.
Yes, please, thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question, of course. Well, on one hand, I would say discovering the Earth, discovering the world is something you need. You cannot explain to a little child or to a little kid that he's going to see only this place. Traveling is part of peace. Traveling is part of discovering. But what is important are 2 points. First point is definitely to know that when you go somewhere, and especially to fragile places, and especially to the northern and southern areas, is to be limited as we do with Ayato in places. Just remember that only 5% of the places are open. Well, I mean for tourism. That you have guidelines telling you that you don't have to approach the animals so and so close, etc., etc. It's different depending on different animals. You have site guidelines, and you have to follow them. Why? That is, again, the first point. Why? Because you need not to disturb, not to leave any print, just memories. That is point number one. Point number two is that we need such people and such tourists as white ambassadors. I will give you, I'm sorry about that, another instance, not from Antarctic. But when I bring my people to the Arctic, I made lectures, sometimes with 1,000 people attending, 3,000. And at the very end, they told me, okay, yeah, Nature Conservancy, that's important. But one day later, they forgot. When you take somebody and you bring him to the place where you see the glaciers retreating, that can be seen. When you explain him that the problem of polar bears is hunting and pollution, when you tell him that the problem is the sea, over 70% of the seas are overexploited in the north. So that means we can, with our activities, show what is really important.
If I can just interrupt you to come back to the gentleman's question, do you think too many people are going to the Antarctic, or do you think not enough are, or is the number just about right?
No. Yeah, as I told you, We are now, for the moment, between 60 and 70,000, and it will reach probably be more than 100,000. And as much people, as much limitations. There will be cruise limitations for sure in the future. As I told you already, big vessels are banned. Vessels with 500 passengers are not allowed to land. Now, more and more, we are speaking about only one landing per vessel, as much people as less activity.
So do you feel that the benefits outweigh the damage that's done?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thanks very much for your answer. I appreciate that. We have the lady behind Dr. Sylvia Earle, first of all, and then afterwards we'll take your question too, Doctor.
Hello, my name is Leila Gandhi. I'm independent reporter and TV host. I would just follow back on what Florian said. I have one question. I think one word that came up quite often is the word observation, which is definitely something that we need to do to collect data and gain in knowledge, that's for sure. But my concern will be about action. And as a citizen, what can we do? Because now we're talking about Antarctica, but obviously the climate change impacts Antarctica, but it's coming from the whole world. And us, as billions of people, what can we do? For example, it has been mentioned the problem of fisheries that make penguins die because of a lack of food. Why do we not say, just simply and boldly, we should consume less, if not stop eating fish, for example? Why cannot we just list the concrete action that we can undertake to just stop observing and start acting? Because there are solutions. And we have to change our own habits.
Thank you. And in fact, this afternoon, some of the things we'll be talking about is the positive action taken, but I think everybody would agree to you, more action needs to be taken. Dr. Sylvia Earle, please.
Well, to that point, it's been observed that there's a high degree of protection for the land in Antarctica. And those who go to observe and to enjoy the beauty of Antarctica go with a sense of privilege, a sense of care. But the fishing industry, why are the waters around Antarctica not regarded with the same respect as the land? That is a question, I think, for our time. There is a substantial area, the Ross Sea, that is protected from exploitation, but most of the waters, most of the area south of 60 degrees is open for exploitation, and it is high seas. No one really owns that, or maybe we all have a vested interest in what happens there, with particular reference to climate and extracting the carbon, the shrimp, that is the krill, the fish, disrupts the very basis of the carbon cycle, which relates to climate. And when you know that no humans have ever, until 200 years ago, had access to these waters, it seems that who suffers if we just make it as fully protected for the ocean as the land is protected? And who wins? I think that's the topic that we need to address perhaps this afternoon. But I would love to hear from those who are conducting the expeditions, the tours. Do you encounter fishing vessels? I mean, there are hundreds of them that are operating, and they operate and they play by different rules.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sylvia. Many more questions. We'll take the gentleman with the bow tie.
Thank you so much. Carl Gustav Lundin. I also work with Sylvia Earle at Mission Blue. So there was a report out very recently about the whole question of soot from the ships. There was a calculation that more than 80 tons per passenger would be lost because you get more heating from the black spots on the ice. So I just wanted to hear some of our colleagues here from the tourism industry to say, what are you going to do to prevent this? Obviously, there are technical solutions, but they all have pluses and minuses. So a little bit of a sort of, perspective on that would be interesting.
Great. If we could, who would like to answer that? If you can keep it really succinct, because I'm being asked to...
Just that I would like to say that we can use also a cruise ship, as we are doing on Le Commandant Charcot, as a platform for the science. I didn't mention this, I just mentioned about how to sail in the ice respectfully. But also we have, for example, on board a dry laboratory, a wet laboratory, and we are embarking scientists, free of charge, no charge, that, and they can use the vessel and give us finally some credit to our cruise. And we are also, in parallel, doing participating science with the passenger, like we are using, for example, Happy Well apps. So we can involve also our passengers, and we can, we can offer also our vessel for the scientists during, especially because we are going to the place where finally nobody goes. So I think it's tremendously important to give us.
Thank you very much. I'll draw you to a halt there if I can, because I'd like to take one more question before we break for coffee from the lady here on the fourth row. Does somebody have a microphone?
Thanks to everyone for this very interesting presentation. We have been speaking about motorboats, and there is a gentleman here in the audience who just returned from a trip, a sailing trip, not a motorboat trip, sailing trip to the Antarctica. What about increasing sailboats instead of motorboats to have a lesser carbon impact?
Actually, we'll be hearing from that gentleman this afternoon, so I don't want to steal his thunder, so maybe this afternoon we'll be able to hear everything that he has to say. And with that, I invite a break for coffee, an opportunity to network. Bernard asked me
we
to
can
break.
continue the questions for now.
Oh, we can? Okay. So
Yacht Club, you know.
So who would like to answer that question? So why not more sailing boats? What can we do to encourage sailing boats? Gentleman here.
Well, I think for one thing is, look at the pictures. There is very little wind there, or there is too much of it. So you can't make a program based on sailing only. A sailing boat would have to use her engines anyway.
Yes, in fact, that's something I've noticed in the world of yachting, is that very often sailing boats will use their motors probably more than their sails. I have been instructed to ask for a break for coffee, network.
Maybe
you
another
sure?
question here.
Okay, we'll go for more
I'm
questions
sure.
then. I have Bernard telling me to close for coffee, and no, apparently. So I'll go with Christina, because
David,
she
the
scares
Yacht
me a
Club,
lot
you
more,
need to
quite
understand
honestly.
the word impermanence. So we continue with the questions.
Great. Espen, please. Espen Oeno.
Sorry, Espinono. Just a quick note on what's been said here. Thank you for everyone. It's been extremely interesting. I have had the opportunity myself to go down to Antarctica, and I can relate to a lot of what has been said. One thing that wasn't said, though, I thought, was the fact that you go down there. Most of the people, I think, are very responsible. And in going down there, you're actually creating ambassadors for this continent. You're creating awareness. Everyone has been down there. I think will agree that it's been a life-transforming experience. They would go back, share the experience, pictures, stories, with their family, with their friends. And I think that's very important. It's a fine line. How many people do you let in there? How many people do you put back? But it's a fine line. But it's very important. As for the question of sailing boats, I'm a naval architect and a yacht designer, and what we have seen in over the years in talking to our clients and users of the boats, most yachts are actually, when the guests are on board, stationary for about 80 to 85% of the time. And they don't actually cruise that much. And including when we were in the Antarctic Peninsula, you spend a lot of time stationary. And when you are stationary, you still need to run your generators. You still need to run your services, your laundry, your galley, your heating, your air conditioning, your lighting, and so on. So it's true, of course, we all love sailing boats, but as the gentleman said as well, there's either no wind or too much wind down there. It's hard to do. But of course, it's a noble thought, but the practicalities of it is that even a sailing boat, you would need to run your generators. I guess the answer is particle filters and being responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Espen, very much. I remember you telling me about the trip to Antarctica, and it was absolutely inspiring.
It's very inspiring. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Christine, did you just say coffee break?
Coffee break. Okay.
I couldn't believe my ears then. So I invite everybody to enjoy a coffee break, some networking, and we'll be back here around 11 o'clock.
Thank you, everyone, for your attendance. Should you have any question, you are all the panelists and all the speakers are here during the lunch, during the networking session to be available for you. As well, during the coffee breaks and during the lunch, you will have the Sound of the Antarctic with a sonar put in place by Michel André. Enjoy your time.